Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're going to break down one of the most fundamental ideas in service architecture, tenancy. We'll get into what it is, how you can pick the right model for your project, and most importantly, why getting this right is absolutely crucial for the security and the future of your application.
So let's just jump right in with the one question that honestly should keep every developer up at night. When you're building a service for a bunch of different clients, how do you make absolutely sure, 100% positive, that customer A's data can never ever be seen by customer B?
Well, the answer to that big question is a core concept called tenancy. You can think of it as the art of building digital walls between your client's data. It's a system that enforces strict, total isolation, which makes those potential data leaks pretty much impossible.
A really simple way to picture this is to think of an apartment building. Every tenant gets a key, right? But that key is specifically designed to open one door and one door only, their own. Tenancy is basically that exact same master key system, but for your application's data.
Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the different models, you've got to understand why sticking to the standard, proven approaches is such a good idea. See, when you use the standard frameworks, you get this huge head start with all these automatic benefits, like full GDPR compliance and data cloning right out of the box. That means you don't have to waste time re-engineering complex privacy rules. But if you go custom, well, you're on your own and you lose all of that built-in support. So, with that in mind, let's open up what we call the standard toolkit. These are your go-to, well-supported models that are going to cover, I'd say, the vast majority of your use cases.
First up, we've got the most foundational model of all, site tenancy. This is the one you'll reach for when the data you're managing is fundamentally, deeply tied to a specific Wix site.
Think about the kind of data that's always there for a site, no matter what. I'm talking about things like the site's default currency, its main language, or its geographic location. For this model, the system uses the site's unique identifier, the Metasite ID, or MSID, as the key to keep every site's data in its own separate box.
Okay, on to our next tool, instance tenancy. This one comes into play only after a user decides to install a specific app on their site. The classic example here is an e-commerce app. A site doesn't just have products or orders floating around. That data only exists once the e-com app is actually installed. So that app-specific data is a perfect match for instance tenancy. It uses a unique key called the instance ID that gets generated the moment the app is installed, and it creates this secure, unbreakable bond between that app and that specific site. This quote just nails the relationship between the two. Seriously, you can think of instance tenancy as just site tenancy with one extra security check. It asks, okay, does this site exist? Cool, but has this specific app been installed on it? If the answer is no, the system just says, nope, nothing to see here, and access is denied.
All right, let's look at our third standard model. Now, what if the data you're dealing with isn't tied to just one site, but to the user's account as a whole? Well, that's exactly where target account tenancy comes in.
This model is all about assets owned by the user account itself. So think bigger picture here. A list of every site a user owns, all the domains they've bought, or their premium subscriptions. None of that belongs to a single site. It belongs to the whole account. And in this case, the key is the unique identifier for that user's account, the target account ID. Okay, listen up, because this is a super important point and a really common mistake. The target account ID is the account you are performing an action on. It's not always the same as the account that's currently logged in. For example, a support agent might be logged into their own account, but they're working on a customer's account. To keep that data isolated properly, you always have to use the target account. So we've got our three main tools in the toolkit. But how do you actually decide which one to use? Let's walk through a really simple framework that'll help you find the perfect fit for your service. Start with this question. It's that simple. Does the data you're storing fundamentally belong to a website? If the answer is yes, then you're on the right path, and you've already narrowed it down. Your choice is either site tenancy or instance tenancy. But what if that data doesn't really belong to a site? If it's something like a domain name or a subscription that belongs to the user's overall account, then your path is super clear. Target account tenancy is the model for you. And finally, there's one more possibility. You might have a service where separating data between clients just isn't necessary at all. Maybe it's an internal tool or it manages global data. In that case, there's a model for that too, called single tenancy. It basically tells the system, hey, everybody's invited to this party, no separate rooms needed. And here it is, the ultimate cheat sheet. This little table breaks down the four main paths we talked about: site, instance, target account, and single tenancy.
It shows you the key it uses and what it's best for. Seriously, this is a great one to keep handy when you're designing your next service.
But you know, the real world can be messy. And sometimes that standard toolkit just doesn't have the right tool for a really specific, tricky job. So what happens when you know you need multi-tenancy, but none of these standard models quite fit?
Well, this is when you have to step off the main path and venture into the world of custom tenancy. Think of it as your escape hatch for those really unique situations where you need to define your own rules for keeping data separate.
Now, going custom gives you all the flexibility in the world, but it is a trade-off. It comes with a lot more responsibility. You have to write your own logic to figure out the tenant ID from every single request and make sure it's applied correctly every single time. And you lose all those awesome automatic benefits we talked about earlier, so you should only choose this path if you absolutely have to. All right, to wrap things up, let's do a quick lightning round of some advanced, expert-level patterns. You might not need these today or even tomorrow, but it's good to know they exist for those really tricky edge cases.
We're talking about really specific problems, like needing to query across all of your tenants for an internal dashboard, or handling webhooks from external systems that don't know anything about tenant IDs. There are even complex services that might need both site and account tenancy at the same time. Each one of these has a specific pattern you can use as a starting point.
And that brings us to the end. We've laid out the whole map for you, from the smooth, paved roads of standard tenancy all the way to the custom-built trails for those unique cases. Choosing the right model is a huge decision that's going to impact your security, your scalability, and how easy your service is to maintain down the line. So the only question left is, which path will you choose?